I work the creepy night shift at a gas station in Montana and the strange rules are haunting me. I never should have opened that door. The soft creak of the hinges felt like an omen. The gas station sat on the outskirts of town, surrounded by empty darkness. I had the night shift again, just me, the flickering lights, and the relentless wind howling. This job was supposed to be simple. Just fill up the tanks and keep the store stocked. But strange things happened when the sun dipped. LOW.IT started like any other night, filling my coffee cup while the clock ticked slowly, almost mocking me. The smell of burnt coffee hung heavily in the air, mixing with the faint odor of gasoline. The cold seeped in through the cracks, wrapping around me like an unwanted embrace. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision. I brushed them off as fatigue, but then there were the whispers, barely audible, just soft enough to draw my attention. I glanced around. The aisles of chips and soda looked innocent, yet every rustle sent chills racing down my spine. The fluorescent lights buzzed like angry bees, casting a sickly glow that made the shadows stretch and twist. That's when I noticed the first strange rule: never leave the store unattended. I laughed it off initially, thinking it was just a reference to potential thieves in the night. But as the hours ticked by, I felt the weight of those words. My heart raced as a thud echoed from the back room, something heavy being dropped. I took a deep breath and walked toward the noise, my footsteps echoing eerily in the empty aisles. The air shifted, colder now, wrapping around me like fingers tracing my spine. I reached for the doorknob, hesitating as the whispers grew louder, swirling around me. "Don't go in," they seemed to chant, echoing my own doubts back to me. With determination, I twisted the knob, my stomach knotting. The door swung open with a loud creak, revealing nothing but the darkness beyond. A stark silence followed, then a sudden scrape across the concrete floor sent my heart crashing against my ribs. I froze. My mind raced with mounting dread. I stepped back into the flickering light, the shadows seemingly closing in around me. The second strange rule came to mind: always keep the back door locked. It hadn't crossed my mind before, I trusted it like an anchor. But after tonight, how could I? Just then, a sudden crash erupted from the back, louder this time. Panic surged in my veins. I turned, heart pounding, ready to bolt. But as I glanced back, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. A figure emerged from the shadows, half-formed. My breath hitched in my throat. I could hardly see, but I sensed it watching me, waiting, and in that chilling moment, I remembered the final rule I had forgotten: never stare too long into the darkness because it just may stare back. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure lingered just beyond the edge of the glow from the overhead lights, shifting as if it were made of smoke, a relic of nightmares that refused to dissipate. My heart hammering in my chest drowned out every rational thought. I could see its shape more clearly now, a broken silhouette twisted by shadows, limbs elongated and grotesque. It seemed almost human, yet the way it moved betrayed a churning darkness that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. "Get out!" the whispers grew urgent, filling my mind with dread. I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows in the corner of the station had eyes, a multitude of them watching, waiting. They crept closer, a living presence wrapped around me like a suffocating fog that I wanted to run, to bolt for the front door, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. The murmurs transformed into disjointed laughter, chilling and guttural, echoing in the empty spaces between the fluorescent tubes. The light flickered erratically as if it were responding to the being in front of me, its glow lessening, shadows leaping with glee. "Don't let it in," the whispers intensified, morphing into a cacophony of warning. I forced myself to breathe, the air thickening like tar in my lungs. In an instinctive motion, I fumbled for my phone, the one lifeline I had to the outside world, hoping the signal could cut through the dimension of terror I stood in, but before I could unlock it, the figure lurched forward, skimming through the darkness. It moved like a spider, each step dissolving the distance between us. I stumbled backward, the shelves rattling as I knocked into them. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice trembling, echoing off the walls, beckoning silence that it stopped, head tilting unnaturally, exposing a face that flickered in and out of clarity, just a collection of shadows, eyes deep pools of black, swallowing all light. "Join us," it whispered, a sickening harmony of voices blending into one. "Join us," I shook my head violently, my instincts screaming at me to get out. "No." I choked, adrenaline igniting a fight-or-flight response buried deep in my core. I turned towards the aging door behind me, the one marked by chipped paint and rust, my only escape, but as I moved, the store around me felt alive, an entity infused with malice. The aisles twisted, morphing into shapes that pressed against my sides. I glanced back, heart in my throat. It was coming closer, trailing tendrils of shadow like smoke. An endless whisper rose from the aisles as if the merchandise was joining in, their labels deriding me with mocking laughter. There was no time. I ran for the back door, the solid coolness of the knob momentarily soothing against my clammy hand. I twisted it, feeling resistance, panic flooding my veins. "Locked," I whispered to myself in disbelief. The dread pooled in my stomach, heavy and dark. "Help," I murmured, but the word caught in my throat as the figure collided with the light, a burst of darkness overpowering it momentarily. It was almost beautiful, a contradiction, a gruesome dance of shadows entwining like ribbons. Desperate, I slammed my palm against the door now, the wood rattling under my weight. The laughter crescendoed, mocking my struggle, and the shadows leapt closer. It was inevitable, I could feel the presence pressing behind me, as if the darkness were breathing, hungry. Suddenly, a soft, sinister tapping echoed from the front of the gas station, steady and rhythmic, drawing my attention away from the door. My heart dropped. The front windows, the entry point to the outside world, were now draped in that extinguishing black curtain, the very thing I feared most. "Let us in," the figure whispered, its voice enveloping me like a vice. "Let us in." Frozen in terror, I hesitated to turn around. But the tapping intensified, morphed into a pounding, a fist unrelenting in its insistence. The shadows around me thickened, no escape visible through the growing wall of dark. Then came the sound of glass shattering, an explosion of despair as the front door flew open, an uncontrollable draft snaking through the station. A cacophony of despair swept in, swirling the stale air into a cyclone of screams, the screams of those who came before, echoing their terror that I was not alone. I never had been. As the darkness poured inward, I turned back to the figure, heart racing, dread spilling over. The shadows melded into forms, silhouettes of lives long lost, souls trapped within this cursed relic of light. They reached for me with pleading hands, eyes wide with an urgent hunger, and in that moment, I knew I could not stay. But as I bolted towards the door, a voice rang out from the darkness, chilling me to my core, "You are one of us now." The shadows surged forward as I lunged toward freedom, and then darkness swallowed the night around me, a chaotic blur encasing my screams as I vanished into the unknown. The darkness was thick, an oppressive weight pressing down on me as I grappled with the confusion that churned in the air. I was lost in a void where the familiar contours of the gas station faded away, replaced by the uncanny labyrinth of swirling shadows and forlorn faces. The echoes of despair surrounded me, the voices whirling in a cacophony that spoke of surrender, of belonging where no light swept. "Help me," a faint voice cried, a haunting pitch that surfaced moments before dissolving into silence. I struggled to comprehend it. Was it a plea, or something far more sinister? The weight of unseen hands grazed my skin, brushing past like whispers of sorrow. They were moments away from being physical, made manifest by the darkness that entrapped me. As I stumbled forward into the depths where sanity warred against dread, a flicker of light caught my eye, a stream from a cracked bulb dangling overhead. I squinted through the murk, trying to piece together what was left of my mind. The gas station, once mundane, now seemed to breathe with its own soul, its very structure shifting as if to ensnare me further. In the distance, the unwelcome wails of trapped spirits formed a chorus of agony, but I pressed on, heart racing that I came upon the snack aisle, its colorful packages distorted by the shadows, creating grotesque faces that leered at me, mouth agape in a soundless scream. They were imploring me to understand, but their message slipped like water through my fingers. I was walking in memories of others, a grid of experiences woven into the fabric of the very walls that held this petrified realm together. "Help join us," I heard again, disembodied but closer, growing more insistent. Every second ticked by like dripping molasses, and with each heartbeat, the sensation of being pulled inward escalated. The fear crystallized within me until it shattered with the shattering of a bottle somewhere behind me that I spun around, clutching my own breath tightly in my chest. The darkness quivered, a torrent seemed alive and electric, pulling at the ambient shadows, demanding my attention. Creatures formed from the fringe of desperation slithered in and out of my vision, glimpses of what lay beneath the surface, their movements fluid and unnatural. Then I heard the shuffling of feet and realized that collectively they were converging upon me, not one, not two, but a mass of them moving with purpose, intent on dragging me into this realm of horrors. I had to escape, I had to break free. I turned and raced down the rows, breathless, but every turn I took only plunged me deeper into the station, familiar yet transcendent, and the exit was nowhere in sight. I could feel them touching me now, probing edges of my awareness, the whispers brushing against my mind like an errant wind. "Join us forever," my body reacted before my mind could comprehend. I dashed to the battery display, which flickered with momentary illumination. I needed something, anything to fight back against the relentless tide of wailing shadows closing in. My trembling fingers flitted across the cold metal, searching for something that might hold power. There, a pair of flashlights, a spark of hope. In frantic motions, I grabbed the first one, switching it on. A powerful beam burst forth, impacting the darkness, illuminating the twisted forms clinging to the periphery. They recoiled, shrinking backward, their gnarled faces contorted with anguish, lost for an eternity. "Back!" I yelled, pouring every ounce of will into my voice. Light exploded around me, pure and brilliant, cutting through the smothering darkness like a dagger. As I shined it toward the advancing shadows, I felt a surge of courage unfurling within, but my moment was fleeting. Even as the light chased them away, I detected a new presence materializing from behind me, colder than the void I had faced, a mass of darkness that eclipsed everything I had just illuminated. It grew larger, an opacity that absorbed the glow until, with a sickening finality, my flashlight flickered and died. Panic surged as I turned, the weight of the shadows returned, coiling around my limbs, seeping into my thoughts. The figures surged forward once more, unstoppable, their laughter a shrill sound that melded into a singular, ruthless entity. I stumbled back into the aisle, desperation turning to frantic dread as I felt the breath of something evil close on my neck. The whispers had transformed into a howl, undulating and terrible, but just as I felt them closing in, a sudden, piercing scream erupted from the far end of the store, slicing through the throbbing shadows, igniting a flicker of hope. Was a customer entering. It cut through the dark like a breaking dawn. I dashed towards the source, propelled by equal parts fear and hope, yet as I reached the threshold to the front of the store, I froze. The gas station stood empty, the grinding silence deafening. "No, no!" I gasped, a single cry echoing through the void. And then I saw it. The door I thought opened, ajar, was a maw darkness offering a frigid welcome, turning its gentle whisper into an uninviting roar. "Join us," echoed once more, but it wasn't just the shadows standing at the door, faces I'd never seen twisted in agony bore their memories imprinted in each scream. Loneliness, betrayal, fear, it was a tapestry of souls tangling us all together, drawing me into their dusty embrace. I recoiled, realizing what I had stumbled upon, a world far more sinister than I had ever anticipated. "Get out!" I screamed into the void, yet the desperate cries of those beyond the threshold resonated within me, and then another shadow elongated, forming from the chaos, solidifying until it stood before me, a gleaming knife shimmering in its ghostly hand, the very blade that carved through despair, offering me a terrible choice. "Will you take it?" it asked, voice echoing like the final thrust of a dagger, a chilling promise coursing through the waves of dark. But I couldn't respond. Terror rooted me in place as the shadows murmured closer, encircling me, hunger dancing in their grasp. The blade gleamed, and I could feel its inviting coolness against my palm as I reached for it, my fate hanging by an unspeakable thread. Choose, or be chosen, the murmur echoed gently in my ear, chilling my blood. And then, as the weight of the world pressed down on me, I was left standing on the edge between light and darkness, teetering upon the knife's edge, poised for either salvation or eternal despair. The atmosphere crackled with an electric tension, shadows thickening as I stood there grasping the cold metal of the knife. My heartbeat echoed like a drum, each pulse radiating fear and curiosity. The entity before me, an amalgamation of darkness and desperation, waited with a predatory stillness, its gaze boring into my very soul. It was as if the shadows themselves held their breath, waiting for my choice to reverberate through the stillness of the gas station. Choose, it whispered again, or be chosen. I didn't dare look away from the knife, its sheen an alluring promise, yet I felt the ice of uncertainty creep into my veins. Behind the entity, a sea of faces writhed in agony, coalescing out of the darkness, each one a fleeting reminder of a life extinguished too soon. The memories seeped into my thoughts, drowning me in a maelstrom of their torment, a cacophony of regrets and dreams never realized. Suddenly, the lights flickered above, sputtering in defiance as they cast haunting silhouettes against the walls. It was a dance of the damned, flickering reminders that something within the station was alive, a creature sustained by fear and desperation. I gripped the knife tighter, my knuckles widening. "Does this give you power?" I finally managed to stammer, pointing the blade hesitantly toward the figure. It chuckled softly, a dreadful sound that resonated within me, pushing me further into despair. Power? No, it leaned closer, and an icy dread slithered up my spine. This allows for a choice, a means to an end. Fear is not an obstacle, it is a companion, a bond steeped in pain. No. The scream erupted from my throat unbidden as I turned my back to the figures, wishing the illumination of the knife would push back the darkness. The whispers morphed into a low growl, an uproar of insistent voices rising in an angry crescendo. And then I heard the faint sound of movement behind me, a shuffle akin to a child's footfall. I whipped around, my heart seizing in my chest as I beheld a small figure illuminated in the dimness. A girl, no older than 7, stood at the edge of the aisle, her once bright eyes now hollowed by despair. Dirt smudged her cheeks, and her once white dress hung tattered and torn. "Please help me," she croaked, stretching out a trembling hand. The sudden shift in my focus sent ripples through the air. The hulking shadows flickered, their horrific contortions momentarily losing their grip. "What? How?" My voice faltered, caught between recognizing her innocence and my gut instinct to flee. "Take the knife," she urged, her voice soft yet insistent, "and use it to cut through the dark." Before my rational mind could process the absurdity, the entity grinned wider, its delight spreading across its face like a grotesque mask. "You see? Another to join us." "Stop!" I shouted. The girl took a hesitant step forward, courage flickering across her face, yet the shadows behind her lurched closer, their shared hunger palpable. "Join me, and I can guide you," she whispered, her eyes glistening with something hope. "You can end this torment, break the cycle." The veil of terror wrapped around me, squeezing tighter, making my already frantic thoughts even more muddled. The knife glinted ominously, I felt the weight of destiny in my palm, and the shadows drew closer. "Don't listen," the entity hissed, stretching out shadowy tendrils as it lurched toward the girl. In that moment, understanding blossomed within me. The souls trapped in this wretched place needed someone to break the cycle, not to choose darkness, but to fight it. I hesitated for only an instant, deciding that the light of hope was worth the risk. With a surge of resolve, I lunged toward the girl, raising the knife not as a weapon but as an emblem of defiance. I aimed for the heart of the encroaching dark. "Now!" I cried, ready to strike at the tendrils curling around her. But just as I thought I found clarity, the shadows shuddered, warping unnaturally in my direction. A blinding flash erupted from the very depths of the darkness, fracturing reality, engulfing my mind in a storm of Chaos. Everything exploded into a kaleidoscope of terror, and the walls of the gas station warped, the shelves tilting precariously before bending into themselves like a collapsing star. I blinked, the noise of despair eclipsed by a sudden silence. I found myself standing alone in a vast expanse of black, the knife hanging limp in my hand, the girl gone, and the entity nothing more than a whisper in the void, and then it hit me: an unearthly presence loomed just beyond my peripheral vision, a colossal shadow stretching against the nothingness, pulsating with malicious intent. It wasn't merely watching, it had begun to materialize. That I stumbled back, a scream lodged in my throat, the creeping dread consuming the remnants of my sanity. What had I awakened? In that instant, the knife vibrated in my grasp, and from behind the presence came a sound, a familiar, chilling laugh that echoed through the darkness like an omen. I turned to face the void, my breath hitching in my chest. And there, emerging, was a face I knew well, twisted by malice, a reflection of what I feared most. "Welcome back," it crooned, its voice a haunting melody weaving through the shadows, playful yet sinister. And just like that, I found myself again standing at the precipice of choice, caught in an endless cycle as the gas station around me pulsed with terrible life, and the door to my fate swung wide open, revealing unspeakable horrors waiting just beyond. The darkness began to sway as I felt the weight of that wicked smile press down on me, suffocating my thoughts. I gripped the knife tighter, hopeful that its cold blade would stave off the madness clawing its way into my mind. The voice, tainted with laughter, echoed through the void, twisting reality like a cruel joke, forcing me to confront my own fear, my own darkness. "Isn't this what you wanted?" it taunted, emerging fully from the inky depths. Light and dark intertwined, the very essence of choice. Embrace it, or lose yourself completely. I stepped back, fear tumbling over the edge of my resolve. The gas station had transformed from a refuge into a nightmare. It felt as if the shadows were no longer separate from me but wrapped around my existence, questioning every breath I took. The boundaries of reality were fraying, and I was tethered to the abyss, the familiar face twisted like a broken record, its features a grotesque imitation of someone I once held dear. My heart raced as an icy recognition clawed at my gut. It was my brother Adam, long lost to the stranglehold of addiction and despair. His eyes gleamed with an unnatural hunger, a haunting mix of sorrow and derision. "Come on. You can't tell me you don't want to see me again," he cooed, his voice lilting in the chilling air. "Your sacrifice can end the torment, just hand over the knife." "No. You're not him," I shouted, my voice echoing in the void as I took another step back, the shadows curling around my feet like snakes, urging me to accept the dark bargain. Why resist? Do you believe you can conquer them all? How many have become the shadows in blissful surrender? His image flickered, briefly replaced by the pain-stricken faces of the others, the dead women, the lost children, all those who had roamed the gas station seeking solace. Whispered cries echoed around me, wrapping me tighter in their sorrowful embrace. The shadows hissed, a thousand breathless voices merging into one, clawing at my sanity. "Choose now, or we'll choose for you." I stumbled as the weight of their fear bore down on me, their suffering resonating through my bones. My resolve crumbled. I could feel the knife trembling, almost pleading within my grip, urging me to take action. Do it for them," Adam shouted, his twisted grin growing as despair swirled around me. "Shut up." My voice boomed back, surprising even me. I couldn't afford to be weak now. I couldn't succumb to this sick game. I raised the knife again, but the shadows lunged for me, a wave of darkness and despair crashing like a tidal wave. As I fought to keep the blade steady, I felt something brush against my cheek, a spectral caress that sent shivers through me. I turned just in time to catch a flicker of someone darting towards me from the depths of the darkness. The girl from before, the one who had pleaded for help. "Don't give in." Her voice screamed, breaking through the silence as she dashed beside me. "You're stronger than them. Fight." Her words ignited something within, a deep-seated will to resist the encroaching dark. The entity shrieked, a furious howl that reverberated around us, sending a pulse of malevolence rippling through the air. But in that moment, my brother lunged again, his ghostly hands reaching toward the knife, his eyes glistening with manic fury. You can't escape. You can't win. Join us, and we'll be free. With the weight of the world upon my shoulders, I swung the knife, not at my brother, but at the shadows, letting out a primal scream that resonated through the darkness. Release them! I cried. A blinding light erupted from the blade, an incandescent shockwave that sliced through the oppressive weight of the darkness, momentarily banishing the shadows. The tormented figures wavered, their screams merging into one desperate unison, but as the light began to shatter the void, everything crystallized into a jagged moment, a final glimpse of clarity. I realized I might be losing the battle, as the darkness was only temporarily held at bay. Suddenly, one of the faces in the swarm solidified amidst the light. My father, his visage tarnished by grief, urgency pulsing behind his eyes. Choose! He shouted, his voice a piercing command that cut through the chaos. Choose, and free them all or succumb to agony. Before I could fully process his words, the darkness rallied, diving back into my mind, coiling around my thoughts like a serpent ready to strike. My father's face flickered, dissolving into shadows, and I felt the shadows descend upon me, invasive, demanding. Your time is nearly up, they crooned, a slew of hands grasping at my ankles, pulling me toward the fathomless abyss. The knife will be yours, or it will be ours. In that moment, the world shattered and reassembled, a terrifying world that made me question every part of my existence. I clutched the knife to my heart, ready to plunge it into the unknown, the echoes of the faces swirling around me demanding release, but as I readied myself, a clap of thunder roared through the void, and I froze. There, in the midst of the shadows, something unimaginable stirred, a pulse of insatiable hunger that felt distinctly alive. I didn't know what would come after this, only that the next moment could unfold into an eternity of terror. Suddenly, something unrelenting surged from the abyss, stronger, darker, its intent clearer than before. It began to rise, blocking out the fleeting light, consuming all hope, leaving only the weight of despair. The mere notion of surrender clawed at me, and just as I was about to scream again, everything went black. I felt the knife slip from my grasp, the shadows closing in, and the laughter swelled, an inexorable chorus that promised to drown me forever. I braced for the end, only to hear a new sound cutting through the wails, sharp, guttural, and horrifying. Time is over, the entity whispered as the darkness enveloped me completely. And right then, the weight of my final choice loomed, drowning in shadows as the gas station transformed into a hellish prison, sealing my fate with a terrible finality. The gas station flickered back to life, yet something was different. The walls pulsed with a rhythm of their own, as if the very structure was alive, breathing in sync with my panic. I squinted against the darkness, fighting to discern the shape of the room, but it felt far too vast, an infinite maw that was eager to consume my sanity. That I staggered forward into what had become an impossible labyrinth, my ears filled with hushed whispers that coiled around me like barbed wire tendrils. Each breath felt heavy, charged with unseen energies that crackled in the humid air. I fought the urge to scream, forcing myself to remember that I still held the knife, my only semblance of control in this chaotic hellscape, but as I turned, the shadows seemed to shift, warping into something tangible, revealing a figure standing just beyond the flickering light. It was her, the girl from before, eyes now brimming with sadness and something else, something darker, almost predatory. "Help me," she said, her voice breaking through the veil of sinister murmurs like a ray of moonlight piercing a stormy night. The words felt heavy, laden with truth and a burdensome request that resonated painfully in my chest. "Help me break the cycle. I can't." I stammered, each syllable pulling me deeper into despair. "I can barely keep myself together. I don't know how to help you." Within an instant, she was gone again, her form dissolving into an erratic dance of shadows that swirled and twisted around my feet. The darkness lashed at me, and I felt the air grow thick, pressing in from all sides, suffocating the remnants of my spirit. Then, out of the corners of my vision, I saw them, the faces. They blurred together, the children's wide, frightened eyes, the distorted grins of the women who had come here seeking something only to find themselves ensnared in this ethereal prison. They beckoned to me, their mouths moving in grotesque synchrony, whispering unearthly secrets meant to unhinge my mind. "Join us," they urged, their voices melting into liquid darkness, pooling at my feet. "Join us, and be free forever." "No!" I shouted, and the thin veneer of my sanity wavered again. The knife trembled in my hand, and I feared the will to resist was spiraling away into the same void that cradled their souls. I stumbled backward, barely keeping my grip on the blade, and suddenly, the lights flickered more violently. They hurried to extinguish themselves, a staccato rhythm that mirrored the chaotic thumping of my heart. Shadows clung to the walls, and with each flicker, the air grew electric, pregnant with a weighty promise of calamity. "Too late," intoned a whisper from the depths, so close, utterly intimate. "You have already chosen." An unfamiliar voice echoed from the darkness, a chorus of twisted laughter melding eerily with the shadows, urging me to surrender. The ground thrummed beneath me, and a shiver raced down my spine. Before I could reflect upon my choice, the floor erupted in a sprawling, surreal fissure, casting a sudden plunge into a deeper abyss. I stumbled but managed to keep my footing, my eyes drawn to the widening shadowy maw that threatened to swallow me whole. As I peered into the vortex, I saw glimpses of other realms, terrifying visions of those left behind in torment, figures writhing in the shadows beyond the thin veil of reality. The girl flashed before me, her face twisted in agony, pleading for my help, but every time I reached for her, she slipped away, as insidious and fleeting as a dream. "Help me!" she cried again, now screaming as she clawed against the border between dimensions. "Please!" Something within me hardened the realization that I couldn't afford to let her darkness consume me. The knife was still there, pulsing with embers of defiance. Fueled by desperation, I plunged it into the ground with a force that rattled my bones, hoping to anchor myself against the chaos swirling around me. A blinding light exploded from the blade, casting tendrils of illumination through the darkness and momentarily stilling the shadows. They screamed a cacophony of terror and rage as they shrank back, allowing me to breathe again. Yet in that blink of hope, I noticed something amiss. The figures didn't vanish, they merely recoiled. Their faces twisted in a perverse semblance of hope and fear, the balance shifting. "Too strong," they hissed, voices overlapping like a desolate chorus. "You must make a choice, be ours, or witness their suffering." The shadows writhed in impatient desperation, and then there was something behind me, lurking just out of sight but undeniably present. I could feel its breath, hot and rancid like the tomb of the forgotten. When I turned, the girl stood there once more, but she was not the same. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, an imminent threat that rendered my heart cold. "I will help you," she said, a smirk curling her lips which now seemed deepened with malice. "Let go of the knife and embrace the darkness." In that fragile moment, the world around me began to spiral again, fractures of reality erupting like shattered glass. My heart pounded as I prepared for the inevitable. Would I choose to succumb and aid the darkness that held these souls captive, or would I struggle against it, risking everything to find what lay beyond the veil? I took a breath, every muscle tensed for the confrontation, but then I felt it, the ground shifting, a new force rising beneath me, powerful and engulfing. The shadows surged forward, their grasp tightening with insistent urgency. Before I could react, I was pulled into a roaring black vortex that coiled around me, unyielding, fierce, a tempest of spirits beckoning me into an irreversible fate. "Time to choose," their voices shrieked, suddenly joined by another chilling sound, a low, dreadful growl echoing from the pit of darkness, and in that moment, everything went silent, the air thick with an unholy anticipation. I was left staring into the abyss, heart racing, waiting for the next harrowing moment that would dictate not only my fate but the countless souls who lingered on the edge, lost to the darkness, forever. The silence stretched on, palpable and torturous, like a noose tightening around my throat. I was suspended in that oppressive stillness, the darkness a living entity that pulsated with a hunger that I could taste. Shadows coiled and writhed around me, their whispers rising to a fever pitch, urging me to surrender to despair. I felt the insidious pull of the darkness, its fingers curling around my mind, coaxing me to forget, to give in, but somewhere deep in the recesses of my consciousness, a flicker of resistance fought against the tide. The girl's anguished face haunted me, a reminder that my struggle was not just for my own life but for the countless souls caught in this relentless cycle of torment. I clenched the knife tighter, feeling the reassuring coldness of the steel meld with the warmth of my blood coursing through my veins, a lifeline anchoring me in a sea of turmoil. Then, before I could process the shift in the atmosphere, the darkness shuddered. The walls around me began to breathe in more violently, pulsating like a living heart caught in the throes of a dying struggle. Broken memories enveloped me. I staggered back, colliding with the flow of air that dragged me deeper into the cavernous void. Visions rushed through my mind, a kaleidoscope of faces, images burned into the fabric of this nightmarish realm. Weeping mothers, brandishing weapons, pleading fathers falling to the ground, children lost and alone. Suddenly, a piercing scream sliced through the silence, a raw echo that seemed to resonate from the very core of the gas station. My heart raced as I spun, looking for its source. The girl burst forth from the shadows, not the pleading child I had seen before, but a grotesque distortion of her former self. Her mouth stretched wide, revealing jagged, glistening teeth, and her eyes, once glowing with sadness, now radiated pure malice. "They're coming for you," she gnarled, lightning crackling behind her. "You have to choose. It's either them or you." With every word, the air thickened with desperation. I felt my grip on reality waver, a thin thread I was barely clinging to. The darkness around me thickened, and I could sense more entities rising, their grotesque forms lining the edges of my vision, shadows of the damned lost souls yearning for release, willing to drag me down into their misery. At their head loomed a figure, a monstrous silhouette that towered above the rising tide of darkness. Its eyes were twin voids, devoid of compassion or warmth. As it stepped forth, every fluttering flicker of the gas station lights pattered in terrified rhythm, mirroring the battle raging within me. The moment hung precariously, like a pendulum caught between two inexorable forces. I felt the girl's spirit fighting to pull me back, even as she writhed under the overwhelming weight of the dark entity. "Fight it!" she screamed, her voice layered with agony. "Your fear gives them power." As though sparked by her words, a flicker of resolve ignited within me, but just as quickly, the entity lunged forward with a howl, unfurling its monstrous maw ready to consume. I raised the knife instinctively, and a young voice cried out from the shadows, "Mom, please don't let them take me." Horrified, I turned to see a small hand grasping at the shrouded walls, a little girl reaching out, her eyes wide with terror. The shadows slithered around her, mocking her helplessness while the entity drew closer, baring its fangs. "Take her place," it growled, a sinister bargain laced with promises of safety. The ground trembled underfoot, nostrils flaring with rancid breath as I felt myself teetering on the precipice between despair and defiance, that fragile light struggling to pierce through the suffocating gloom. My heart raced, pounding in tandem with the duel of spirits surrounding me. As I met the anguished gaze of the little girl, tears streamed down her cheeks, beckoning me to make the only choice that could save her, but just then, a deafening roar erupted, resonating through the vaults of darkness. The gas station quaked as the shadows recoiled. Fractures spiderwebbing through the walls exposing horrifying visions, trapped lives, each tormented within their own horror. "Join the darkness," they wailed in unison, their voices weaving into one strident chant, and without warning, shadows surged toward me, forming a massive wall that blotted out all possibility of light, all hope for escape. I was engulfed, standing at the crossroad of their desires, teetering on the brink where only the choice between damnation or salvation beckoned. With a rush of adrenaline, I raised the knife once more, shimmering faintly against the smothering night. I could feel their malicious breath on my skin, the insistence clawing at my resolve, demanding an answer to my dilemma. Every beat of my heart screamed for me to act, but fear paralyzed me, gripping my throat like a vice. "Choose!" the entity roared, fangs glistening in the haze of darkness. With the floor heaving beneath me, I felt a shift not just within myself but through the realm all around. As the shadows lunged for my throat, my heart thundered with a singular thought: my choice would either shatter this reality or plunge us all into darkness forever. I could only hope that when the time came, I would have the strength to make the right decision. Then, with a violent quake, the ground split beneath me, yawning wide open, consuming everything I once knew. And before I could catch my breath, I tumbled into the abyss, the roar of shadows and the cries of the lost echoing behind me as I plunged into the unknown, faced with the most chilling question yet: what lay at the bottom of this pit, waiting to claim me? As I plummeted into the abyss, the air around me thickened, filled with a cacophony of whispers, each one a distinct, tortured plea. They mumbled and chanted like 1,000 souls spiraling through a dark void, their cries clawing at the very edges of my sanity. Shadows curled and whipped around me, the tangible weight of their despair pressing in from all sides. My heart raced, thrumming along with the chaos, and though I could not see the ground or any light, a chilling sensation pricked the skin on my arms, urging me to brace for the impact that in an instant, I felt myself land, but rather than solid ground, it was as if I had collided with a sea of shadow. I gasped for breath, the oppressive darkness wrapping around me like a wet, suffocating blanket. The moment I began to push against it, glimmers of pale light began to flicker and weave through the gloom. Catching my breath, I squinted through a haze, desperate to make sense of my surroundings. What I saw plunged me deeper into despair. I was in a twisted reflection of the gas station walls bulging outward beyond reason, the air thick with dread and the stench of decay. Eerie fluorescent lights buzzed erratically, illuminating swirling patches of darkness that weren't shadows but something far worse. These moving shapes writhed, grasping at the air with skeletal hands, reaching hungrily for solace, for freedom, and for me. "Help us," a chorus of voices pleaded, intertwining, echoing from all directions. Faces emerged from the shadows, flickering like old film reels distorted by ghosts. Each was marred with anguish, eyes wide with helplessness, phantom mouths twisted into silent screams. They were the lost, remnants of those who had once walked the aisle of my gas station, forever trapped in this nightmarish echo of existence. "Get out!" One voice cried, piercing through the overwhelming soundscape, a singular echo that felt almost familiar. My heart raced as I recognized the determined fervor of the girl. "Run while you can. They're coming back." I staggered back, instinctively clutching the knife. Just as I did, a bellow erupted from the walls around me, causing them to shudder. "You belong to us now," the phantoms hissed, their disembodied voices mingling with the shaking shadows that twisted into monstrous visages. I could see them clearer now, fanged mouths dripping with venom, eyes glistening with malevolence, each reaching for me with skeletal fingers that promised nothing but torment. Suddenly, the floor heaved violently, and the shadows surged towards me, building into a mighty torrent. I could feel their pull, dragging at my feet, attempting to ensnare me in their web of despair. The girl's voice jutted sharply through the cacophony, "You're the key. Fight them." "What do I do?" I gasped, testing the weight of the knife in my hand. "What do I choose?" "Choose hope," she screamed. "Choose to save them." Her cry ignited a flicker of courage within me. I stepped forward, my heart pounding defiantly against the clamorous tide. As I gripped the knife tighter, a fierce determination surged through me. I had been given a choice, but it felt less like a decision and more like the invocation of a fury that transcended terror. Just then, as if summoned by my resolve, the figures lunged. I swung the knife with all my strength, slicing through sickly shadows, feeling some resistance break against the steel. As I did, the shadows screamed, their anguished wails echoing through the abyss. A ghastly mist began to rise, swirling off the severed tendrils, creating an irregular fog that glimmered with a sooty luminosity. "Run!" I felt the energy of the place shift, the shadows recoiling as they struggled to maintain their grip on me. My pulse raced, and I plunged forward into the fog, weaving through the darkness that wrapped around me like tendrils of a nightmarish serpent. Then, as I burst through the mist, I saw the neon glow of the gas station ahead, yet it flickered erratically like a dying star. Hope ignited inside my chest, but with it came the terrible realization that the horrors I faced would fight tooth and nail to reclaim me. Out of the fog, a monstrous form emerged, an abomination crafted from shadow and sorrow, its face a grotesque mockery of the girl, her twisted features wrought with malice. "You cannot escape!" It shrieked, every word punctuated by the wails of countless souls, melding into one desperate cry. "I have to try. I yelled back through the thickening terror, my instincts bubbling beneath the surface. As the entity surged forward, I felt something powerful shift within me, a recognition, an understanding of what I needed to do. That I stood my ground, knife raised defiantly before the beast, but the very foundation trembled, cracking beneath my feet. The gas station flickered as the rift between realities began to tear further apart, the shrieks of the trapped souls echoing like a funeral dirge. As the monstrous silhouette closed in with a screech that thundered through my bones, I took a step towards the gas station and away from the darkness, whispering a desperate prayer, one last gamble where hope danced precariously on the edge of oblivion. But before I could vault towards refuge, the ground crumbled beneath me once more, and as I fell again into inky depths, the final terrifying thought gripped my heart: what if this time, I wasn't just falling? What if I was truly being pulled in, to become part of the darkness I had fought so hard against? And in that moment of sheer horror, the air filled with the chorus of lost souls screaming, "You will join us," as everything around me faded into an embrace of despair. The sensation of plummeting ceased, replaced by an unsettling stillness that engulfed me like a fog. I was no longer alone in that pit of shadow. Frost-laden whispers surrounded me, beckoning and coaxing, luring me deeper into a foreboding realm where reality felt thick, unreal, and twisted. The dread I had fought to shake off settled in my bones like a leaden weight. Slowly, light began to stir within the darkness, but it was frail, more an illusion than illumination, twinkling like dying stars. They danced away from me, leading my gaze to a flickering outline, a door, wrought from ancient wood, its frame trembling, discolored by time and neglect. My instincts shouted at me to flee, but the door drew closer, almost beckoning like a lover from whom I shouldn't have strayed. That I reached for the handle, feeling its cold embrace seep into my palm, an erratic pulse echoing through my skin. With a reluctant, shuddering breath, I yanked it open. The door swung wide, revealing a cavernous room bathed in a sickly green hue. Walls lined with rusted tools and a heavy, wooden counter surfaced from the gloom. Although this space bore no resemblance to the gas station I knew, it was a grotesque parody. "Welcome back," crooned a voice I recognized but couldn't place, slithering through the air like a serpent among leaves. Shadows flickered, morphing into the figures of my co-workers, faces grotesquely distorted, yet their eyes burned with familiar anguish. "We've been waiting for you. Get away from me!" I exclaimed, brandishing the knife unsteadily. The faint glint of steel illuminated trembling hands that mirrored mine. The voice that emanated from the assembly was both mocking and mournful, a cruel mix I could barely endure. "No need to be frightened," one of them said, lips stretching into a grin that fractured. "We're all one big family here. Don't you want to join us?" A chorus of muted laughter floated through the air, egged on by the flickering light. It morphed into screams of anguish, bursts of delirious laughter clashing against desolate pleas, an agonizing symphony. The faces began to blur into an abstract amalgamation, a colleague's smile melted into a scream, another's sarcasm twisted into a gurgling sob. They rained their suffering upon me, their features swelling and swirling, faces merging with bright, sudden lights that blazed before extinguishing in an instant. "Choose!" They screamed in unison, their voices a crashing wave. "Choose to be part of the light or drown in the dark." The choice loomed heavy, a suffocating presence. I stumbled back, unable to shake the feeling that this was part of their trap, a facade spiraling closer to a sharpened edge. I could hear the echoes of the girl, her words rising like chilling specters: "Fight them. Fight for your freedom and theirs." In the shrouded corners of that room, shadows writhed as though taking form. Figures began to emerge. They first seemed cobbled together from the very dread that suffocated me, grotesque beings formed of despair, their limbs contorting at unnatural angles, eyes hollow and hungry, each gripped by an insatiable thirst that I couldn't linger. Adrenaline surged through me as I spun on my heel, grasping the knife's hilt like a lifeline. The figures began to converge, their sharp breaths igniting a flickering ember of defiance in my heart. "I want to become one of you," I yelled, carving through a wall of encroaching shadows, feeling fleeting relief as they paused, the knife cleaving the air as a bastion against despair. That I burst through a doorway that led me back into a long, dimly lit corridor, shadows slithering at my heels like rabid beasts. Each step reverberated through me, a pulse of dread that pleaded for me to succumb. "Aren't you tired?" A hoarse whisper hissed from inside the walls, glowing eyes watching me from cracks and holes. "Nothing ever changes, you can't escape. You'll always return." A blinding light burst forth not far ahead, flickering as if I had opened my eyes to a sunlit sky, but it twisted and soured at the edges, a mirage promising sanctuary but exuding agony. "Help us!" A chorus arose from the darkened corners, resonating with the despair that had begun to feel all too familiar. "You cannot run forever." As I pushed towards the flickering light, a thunderous crash echoed behind me. The figures, now emboldened, raced down the corridor. Their moans joined in despair with the voices of my fellow workers, an overwhelming cacophony of regret urging me to return. The light pulsed, almost beckoning, and with each step forward, I felt the dark threaten to consume me whole. Desperation clawed at my throat as I reached the threshold, the warmth wrapping around me like a hug, promising escape. But I stumbled back as the ground quaked beneath me, the walls curled inward, shadows stretching, morphing into gaping mouths ready to devour my essence. At that moment, realization seized me. I had a fatal flaw. The girl's voice had imbued me with power, but only to face the darkness, never to escape without making an irrevocable sacrifice. Just as I was about to plunge into the blinding light, the specter of the girl appeared before me, her eyes wide, frantic. "You must decide. You are the key between worlds." The ground shuddered violently, splitting apart, and for an agonizing heartbeat, I understood the true terror of my choices. Then, the floor ruptured, a deep void yawning wide, swallowing everything, my potential sanctuary and the twisted scream of the lost, all racing into chaos. And as I teetered on the verge of oblivion, the tendrils of despair grabbed at my ankles, whispering the horror that hung just beyond the veil. As the girl's final words enveloped me like an echo, "It's never just a choice, it's a choice for salvation or doom." And I fell once more, not knowing if I was to save them or join the ranks of the damned forever. The sensation of falling halted. I found myself suspended in darkness once more, embraced by silence as the absence of sound deafened me. The shadows drew closer, swirling around my limbs like silk strands, wrapping me tighter as a shadowy cocoon. Fear gripped my heart, suffocating reason with unyielding dread, shredding every bit of hope I had harbored. But then, a single flicker ignited within the gloom, revealing a flickering image, a mirror reflecting not what was around me, but my fractured self. I leaned closer, breath hitching painfully in my throat. What I saw swiftly morphed into shadows, my brother's visage twisted in torment, my mother's face, formerly filled with love, now marred with guilt and despair. They urged me silently to join them, their hollow eyes pleading not to leave them behind. "Choose." Came a voice from the depths, monstrous and cold, echoing the very essence of agony. It was the voice of the darkness that threatened to swallow me whole. I stumbled back, torn between despair and the stubborn ember of defiance simmering at my core. "You've seen their faces, they exist because of you," it taunted, weaving between memories and fears, knitting them into an intricate tapestry of blame. I squeezed the knife tighter, every muscle in my body trembling against the weight of my choices. I could almost hear the girl's voice cutting through the fog, urging me to fight, to resist the call of the shadows. Then, everything came crashing down in an overwhelming uproar, the cacophony of their wails blending into a single lament that clawed at my sanity. "You are one of us. You cannot run." It echoed through the shadows, and I was surrounded once more by the souls that had been trapped here before me. They merged into the darkness, hundreds of faces wrinkling into distortions, muffled screams rising like a tidal wave with their resignation. Only the flickering warmth of the knife remained, the steel shimmered ominously in the darkness, a potential for salvation or annihilation. Suddenly, the ground quaked beneath me, a deep rumble that shook the very foundation of this cursed environment. I teetered once more, memories flooding back, my brother's face corrupting, his essence twisting to mock me. "Join us, and we can be free. Together, we can escape." It was a hellish gift, knowing that my sacrifice would free them, though their salvation would seal my fate. As the shadows coiled tighter around me, I stood on the precipice of the abyss, teetering dangerously between light and darkness. The moment the overwhelming tide of temptation wrapped around my neck, the mirror flickered violently. I glimpsed the depths of the gas station behind me, and suddenly, a brutal thought crystallized in my mind. I wasn't trapped, I was merely a key. They were only seeking a vessel, yet I had the choice. I could either consume myself and feed the darkness, or wield the knife against it, an emblem of defiance that I in an instant, clarity struck with a mind-shattering intensity. No! I screamed, forcing the shadows to recoil. Rising above the voices clamoring for dominance in my mind, I hurled the knife into the darkness. It sliced the air, glinting with a mysterious light before it vanished into the swirling tendrils. I felt a rupturing deep within the shadows. The darkness erupted in furious howls, coiling back, desperate to hold on to its prized possession. That flicker of hope reignited within me, brightening in the center of the chaos the vision of the girl ripping through the murky drapes of despair. You can win. Resist. Fueled by her words and the knowledge that I was more powerful than the darkness that sought to claim me, I took a step back from the precipice and breathed deeply. A surge of strength coursed through my veins. I would not fold. I would not yield to their despair as they tightened their grip around my mind. With every ounce of will, I forced my essence forward, fueled by every lost soul screaming for salvation and absolution. I choose light. I shouted defiantly, almost as if saying it could alter the fabric of fate. The energy rippled through the chamber, rebounding with a wild fury. Suddenly, the knife reappeared, gleaming as a tether pulling me towards a distant light. The sound of the gas station's doors slamming reverberated inside my mind, an agonizing reminder of the soul-crushing weight of the choice I made. I watched as the swirling chaos torn around me split open, and with it, the faces surged, crying out in rage and despair. But I pressed forward, light flooding into the void, illuminating the figures that had once seemed lost forever. It surged forth, the laughter turning to silent screams as the shadows shrieked in agony, unable to bear the sudden onslaught of radiant energy. And suddenly, just like that, I was back in the gas station. The flickering fluorescent lights buzzed above, the air was thick with the scent of burnt coffee and gasoline. Everything felt frozen for a single, haunting moment, before a sharp chill weaved through the air, unanswered and empty. I did it, I breathed in disbelief, the thrill of salvation washing over me. But as I surveyed the room, horror clawed its way back into my heart, each echoing whisper growing louder than the last. But then I saw it, the door opened into the back room, slightly ajar, shadows creeping in through the cracks. I rushed to it, wanting to banish it from my mind, but deep down, I felt it call to me once more. No, I whispered, no, I didn't succumb. I chose, but the moment I stepped closer, I caught sight of the twisted reflection staring back at me in the glass. The very essence of malevolence glinted with sinister promise in its depths. The moment hung in the air, an omen waiting to strike. Join us, the shadows beckoned softly. And with that unsettling realization, the reality morphed again, warping until the gas station around me flickered erratically, becoming nothing more than a facade. I felt the shadows close in, and deep down I knew, it had never truly left me. The darkness had merely been waiting for the right moment to reclaim its prize, and as it washed over me once more, a chilling truth echoed in my mind: the battle was just the beginning, for as long as the door remained ajar, I had become part of its monstrous cycle, tethered to the very essence of despair that sought redemption yet craved darkness. Because at the center of it all, I understood I was never meant to be saved. The haunting truth settled deep in my bones, a malevolent whisper weaving itself into the fabric of my shadow. Freedom had never existed. The darkness and I were bound now, linked in an eternal embrace. After all, I had left the door open.